Greetings and salutations. Welcome to this episode of Playwright Spotlight. Before we begin, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and share the show with a friend. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the channel. Real quick, just as a reminder, Play Noir is coming back, film noir style one-act plays. An evening of them. We'll be bringing that back for our 2025 seasons, and so we are accepting submissions. For more information and guidelines, visit www.punkmonkeyproductions.com. And if you do want more insight into Play Noir, pick up a copy of Play Noir Anthology, 41 film noir style written one-act plays from playwrights from around the world. So you can pick that up on Amazon, BarnesNoble.com, or Walmart.com. My first guest today is a writer and dramaturg at the LA-based theater and arts company, The Braid, where she also develops and moderates programs that give voice to diverse and compelling Jewish voices. Stories from the Violins of Hope, her play about the Israeli violin maker who restored instruments that survived the Holocaust, drew from her lengthy interviews with Amnon Weinstein himself. She is also a proud member of the Dramatists Guild. My other guest is a writer, producer, and founder and artistic director of The Braid, a 17-year-old global nonprofit theater company. She develops and produces the Braid signature salon theater series, curating more than 80 original Jewish-themed programs and adapting many of the pieces performed. She has developed 6 one-person shows, including Not That Jewish, which played 16 months in Los Angeles, then went to off-Broadway for nearly a year. Other plays include Stories from the Fringe and Oscar Wilde's Wife. She is also a graduate of Stanford University and holds degrees from UCLA with an MBA and a master's in writing from USC. She is also on the board of the Alliance for Jewish Theater and is a member of the Dramatists Guild. Their play, The Violin Maker, debuted at the Bondi Beach Pavilion in Sydney, Australia in 2023, and is having its American debut at International City Theater and runs April 23rd through May 11th. And we'll make sure we include the ticket links down below in our show notes. But ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lisa Rosenbaum and Ronda Spinak. Did I say it right?
Yes,
okay.
You did.
That's
Hi, Steve.
For the last few episodes, I always forget to ask beforehand, and I always botch it. So, So, anyways, thank you. I appreciate it. So, I want to get into the history of this because we don't really have a lot of doubled up, a lot of co-writers. We've done a couple episodes, but it's always interesting to see how that dynamic started, where the story came from, and how it is writing and co-writing a piece. So what I read is that this is inspired from your stories from the Violins of Hope, correct? Oh, your stories from the Violins of Hope. Okay, but then the Violin Maker. So was that a full-length play?
No. So
okay. All right, let's hear it.
Let me give you the history then. First of all, the Violins of Hope, which are a collection of Holocaust-era violins that travel all around the world and are played by virtuosi and school children and some of the great orchestras, were coming to Southern California in 2000. I think they were supposed to be here in 2020. Okay. And that was going to be a gala performance, and that was wonderful. The person who was going to conduct that concert, the gala opening concert, was Dr. Noreen Green, and she was talking to somebody who was on the board of the Braid. They just had a conversation telling her about this collection of violins. Okay. And that woman said, "This is an incredible story. This deserves more than just a footnote on a program that, these stories about these violins." She thought it should be dramatized, and apparently it had never been dramatized before, the story of these violins. So Rhonda, who was the artistic director of the Braid, came to me to ask if I would write a dramatic piece about the Violins of Hope. Okay. I had never heard of the Violins of Hope before, but I had a background in this whole area. I had written a novel called A Day of Small Beginnings, which is set in Poland and which has a lot of the history that is very familiar here. My in-laws are also Holocaust survivors. And there was a klezmer tune that actually went through the whole novel, so I was familiar with the rich history of all this music in Eastern Europe. Anyway, so I took a crack at it, and I said, okay, I'll do it. And what I got was a pile of stories of these individual violins. And they came from the son of the Violin Maker. And then I looked, and I knew I had to write something because they were incredible. Every story was incredible. Sure, yeah. I had to choose which ones would work dramatically, but the fact that no one had ever done this was really moving to me.
Sure.
The thing was, that's not a play, a bunch of stories.
Right. Sure.
So it wasn't until I did a little research and found out a little bit more about the man who did this work, who was Amnon Weinstein. Was an Israeli luthier, that I realized I had to speak to him. And that's what I did. I called him, and we ended up having quite a few long conversations, and I was just transfixed by this man. He was just lovely and poetic and interesting, and I realized this is the trunk from, this is the tree, and all those violin stories, they'll just branch out from this. And so that was the beginning. And I wrote this as a theatrical presentation in the style of the Braid, which Ronda has created, which is direct address by single actors, no costumes, no sets. And that was the style that I did this with. We used multiple actors, actors doing multiple parts except for Amnon. And it was ready to go, and then COVID hit. So no performance. And that at that point, we said, well, pivot, And so Ronda had the idea that we could do this on Zoom. It was a little weird on Zoom because we had musicians. The LA Jewish Symphony, they were going to perform live with us, a quartet. And they, if you've ever heard music and talking on Zoom, doesn't work.
Right, sure.
So we had to record them separately from the actors, and then finally the Zoom was too nervous making, and so we filmed it. That film ended up becoming something that was seen internationally, and it could travel to. It went to Latin American countries, like it was translated into Spanish and Portuguese, and then the UN reached out, and they have a global program, and they wanted to do a special program through their global outreach office or something to commemorate Kristallnacht. And we had actually Amnon and his wife Asi appeared at the end of that.
Oh, wow.
And that was beautiful, really beautiful. Yeah. So that was the stories of the Violins of Hope, and it's kind of moved on from there. And then someone saw it in Australia, a producer, and said, we want to do this as a fully staged play. And so that's when Ronda, I said, we have to do this together, because Ronda's got a fabulous history writing plays.
So we're definitely going to unpack that. We'll get to that in a moment. But so was this your first stab at dramatic writing then?
No, because I've been writing for the Braid for years. Doing short pieces. Okay,
and you said there was a particular style. Can one of you unpack what that particular style at the Braid is?
Yeah, so what we do is we take mostly true stories, under 10 minutes, and we put a collection of true stories under 10 minutes together with a bunch of other true stories around a theme. And we cast 4 or 5 actors, and those 4 or 5 actors do all those stories, literally breaking the fourth wall and speaking directly to the audience. We like to say the Braid style is at the intersection of storytelling and theater. So if you think The Moth...
Right, sure.
Right? But those are the writers telling their own stories. The Braid casts professional actors telling writers' stories.
So what do those stories look like on the page? I mean, I'm thinking that they may not necessarily be a traditional structure like any other one-act play would be. Like, it's like, hey, there's this setup, and then there's this payoff at the end. It's just basically here. Is there dialogue? Is there interaction? Are there
Sometimes.
Okay, so
it's a mix.
Talk about that. Talk about that process of like
Sure.
when you guys come together and say, we've got this story, we're going to tell it. Boom, go. What happens next?
Sure. So we put out a call for submissions. Anybody can submit a story to the Braid. Just has to fit the theme. So, for example, right now we have a show running called Hold Me, Heal Me. And it's a compilation of about 12 stories around the theme of kindness and how kindness heals us in our most broken moments. And so what you do is you read all the stories that have been submitted, and then you source stories from blogs, from newspaper articles, from online articles. Sometimes I hear a story that I really like, and the person isn't a writer, and we'll interview that person, transcribe that interview, and then craft the story from their words. So you have, like I said, about 10 stories by different writers in different voices. Cadences of how people tell stories are different. And we adapt it so that sometimes when people write stories, they go off on tangents. Mm-hmm. So we keep to the idea, the one idea that the writer is trying to convey, and drill down on it so that it's basically a setup context for telling the story. Then a bunch of things happen, and there's some resolution and some conclusion. And so what it would look like on a page is, imagine if you told me some story of kindness. Somebody did something kind to you, and you were sharing that story over dinner with me. You would give me the context. You would tell me who that person was that did this thing, and you would go through the paces of what happened in the story and maybe what you learned or what your takeaway was. And so they're really, in many cases, there's sad stories, but in the end they're resolved, and there's a sense of completion in each of these stories. And on the page, it just looks like text.
Okay, so it's basically it's your paragraphs of like when certain things.
So, but when I curate a show, I don't usually have all one-person pieces. So oftentimes when we tell stories, we say, oh, and this person said, and then that person said, and then I did this, and then they said this. So sometimes I'll break out characters.
Okay, interesting.
And so like the main character will step out and start saying, when I was 15, I had this dog, and he had 3 legs, and something happened to him, and my friend said, well, you should just put that dog down. And so I might have a second actor step out and deliver those lines.
Got it. Yeah.
So, yeah.
The other thing is the mission of the Braid is that it is sort of an anti-stereotypical organization. It's telling original stories about the Jewish experience in America. So it shines a light on not only different subjects, but also different communities. So we did a Persian show, for example, that actually went to the 92nd Street Y in New York years ago. And we've done Russian shows. We've done the Spanish show. So all these disparate communities that people don't really even know exist. And they have, each one of them has such taste, such, they all have a little flavor of their own. Yeah. And they're very interesting stories that you would not otherwise hear. So it's a beautiful place to showcase them.
And they're contemporary and American. And Lisa also is a dramaturg for us. So for years, I'll send her all the stories that are curated and been edited once, and she'll read them, and then she'll add her special, spin on them. All the stories get approved by writers. Nothing gets produced or put on our stage without the final approval of every single writer. Okay. And they get bios in the program, et cetera, et cetera.
All right.
It's yeah.
So you come on board at this point, Ronda, and now what's the next step? Where do we go now that we start to develop the Violin Maker?
Well, we started with taking the stories from the Violins of Hope, and that's what we called the play actually in Australia. We hadn't changed the name yet. The Violin Maker is really new for the American premiere. Okay. So what did we do? We took the story. We realized that what it needed was to really start to create an arc so that it was more of a traditional play. Okay. Because the original was Amnon speaking, but it was a lot of the stories. So here was to find out more, and I actually interviewed him some more and got some more of his own background. And so we sat down together and kind of figured out, well, where does this begin? Where does this begin? Where is it going to end? Mm-hmm. We kind of knew where it was going to end.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of specifically.
I think we I mean, because Lisa had done such extensive interviews with Amnon, there were little clues, little breadcrumbs, as you will, that he dropped, little clues about his life. Because obviously, as you know, there's an affection towards this man, and yet we still have to write a drama.
Sure.
We have to tell his story as authentically and as truthfully as we can. But we weren't there when he had a conversation with his father about giving up the violin, or a conversation with his wife when these violins started coming to his workshop. So we had to create that part of the story. And I think what we did initially, we obviously we had this great source material in interviews, and we had also this beautiful piece, 54-minute theatrical presentation with some of the key elements. But we asked ourselves, what drove him? What inspired him? What were his challenges? Amnon Weinstein. What was the relationship like with his father, who was also a luthier? What were the challenges in that relationship? What might have stopped him from creating the Violins of Hope? And we also knew there were some people that played an important part besides his father. There was a young man who came to study with him one summer, violin making, who was from Germany. And so asking the question, well, what would, in Amnon's family, there were a lot of members of the family that were lost in the Shoah. Mm. And Germany, obviously, was prime suspect in a lot of the atrocities. So what would it be like to welcome this German into your home in the early 1990s after the wall had come down? So there were lots of questions. I think when we started, we really were asking ourselves quite a few questions about the history, and then also the psychology of his mother, his wife, this German fellow, himself, the father. And so I think out of what we know of the history started to form some of the plot.
Okay, and so once that happened, once you guys figure out the story, then what happens next? What's that process like? I mean, obviously you came up with the characters, but I mean, I'm not necessarily hearing, not that it has to, because I'm sure there's always there's going to be dramatic action, that's a given. But are we dealing with a protagonist and an antagonist here, or is that not the approach you guys are taking? Are there characters did you combine characters? Say, hey, okay, this person can represent this and this, or I'm just curious how determining who you wanted to include as far as characters go.
I mean, we knew. I mean, the thing is, what we've realized now with this second iteration, the play that is here now, is that what the story is that we finally kind of settled on is that it's the arc of a man who from his childhood wanted nothing to do with the Holocaust, because his father, something was very closed with his father, and his father would never talk about it. We realize all kinds of reasons for that possibility, but there's a mystery there. But how that boy who wanted nothing to do with it evolves into a man who not only embraces this subject, but wants to, through these violins, but also wants to bring it to the world, for the world to hear these voices that have been lost through their violins. That's the arc of the play. Yeah. And that that has been our focus. There are, within that story, there's all kinds of conflict. There's conflict with his wife, who sees things one way. There's conflict with this young German who comes and knows nothing, and it's absolutely mind-boggling to him that this kid knows nothing. And then, of course, the father and the relationship with the father. And it's a complex relationship that's not necessarily about the Holocaust. It's a father-son story, too. So is what it is now, is what it was in Australia completely different than what it is now? Or what changed from Australia to the US besides the title?
In some ways, because Stories to the Violins was so successful in the form that it was, we busted that apart and then reestablished some of those elements into it. And so the story was there, it just hadn't been developed enough. I mean, we just opened way out of town. It was so far out of town, it was down under, We knew that we would learn from that production because it was the first time really it was put on its feet with sets and props and costumes and all that. And we did.
Yeah, and so we really learned from it, watching it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. What are some of those things that you learned, like watching it and saying, okay, this works, this didn't, or
there were stories that we included about him, for example, going to Cremona, which he did as a young man to learn the skill of being a luthier. We had a whole tangent there of him being in Cremona with another student, and when it was in Australia, and the whole thing about the violin having a voice and how is he going to find that voice. And in the end, we said, this is not on the spine of this story. But it took seeing it to realize that, no, we don't need this whole piece. We also expanded the German's role. Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah.
We brought him in and had several more scenes with him because I wouldn't say he's the antagonist, but he's certainly one of those that starts the process of like him getting having the German come and teaching the German. He then goes to Germany to deliver a lecture, and while he's there's some things that happen, and then he comes back, and Israelis are like, "Well, why did you go? What did you expect to happen?" He was trying to make them believe. East Germany was taught by the Russians as behind the Iron Curtain, so their understanding of World War II mostly is different than the West's understanding of World War II. It's a great patriotic war, and how Jews played into that was much less than all those people who were lost by the Soviets. 27 million people were lost. So that's what people knew about World War II, particularly right after the wall came down. Yeah. And so the question was, how do you make people believe when you show evidence and they still don't believe?
Yeah.
And that's a question, obviously, that's very on a lot of people's minds today in 2025 United States of America. No matter what side of the political spectrum you're on.
Right, yeah.
And so the play also, while it being a very personal story of a man really overcoming his family's pain and facing that to be able to do something really good in the world, there's also this underlying theme and question of how do you make people believe if they don't?
So you cut one aspect out, you expanded on another one. Were those the two main things that changed?
Corona changed. I'm trying to remember.
I think we also, sometimes a playwright overwrites in order to find what you're really trying to say, right. And sometimes you say something 5 different ways that are really the same thing. So I think that
Cut out a lot of that.
we edited out. We
Sure.
went, oh, this is really the same thing as
Right,
that,
yeah.
you know. And so paring back, cutting, making it the setup clearer, cleaner, about one thing, one problem, and making that problem clearer from the beginning. I think we also took a part of the end and brought it to the beginning as part of the setup.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you're asking us to really kind of go back and figure out like the many drafts and all the things. I mean, one before we got to this draft, when we came back from Australia, we actually said, oh, it was so interesting. This German whose name in the play is Gunther, who comes to study with Amnon, that the play should just be about him. And we wrote, 40 pages? 40 pages starting with him. And then we realized this is not going to work.
So,
but that informed us.
Yeah.
You know, that helped us to figure out what the scope of his role would be.
Yeah, the other thing that's sort of interesting about this, and that we had to clarify, it was not easy for the Australian actors also to figure this out, and we're watching these actors figure it out, is that the play is a memory play. And so a lot of it is spoken in past tense and in present tense. So it goes back and forth, and the actors have to be pretty facile with realizing, oh, I'm in the scene, I'm in present tense, oh, I'm remembering. And so that whole idea of doing it that way was something that we really developed in this iteration much more.
So I'm going to take you really far back now. So in the
Now we have to remember things.
so
It's been a while.
So and that's what I wanted to unpack the collaborative aspect of this relationship, and the fact that you're writing together. You've got this story that you've brought on board, and now you're developing it into a play. How's this working? You get the story. You figure out what you want to say. You get your framing, so you know what story you're going to cover. Are you going home and writing a scene? Are you going home and writing a scene? How's this working?
So before we get to that, I even want to take you further back, Steve.
All right, fair enough. Yeah.
So Lisa and I have been working together for 10 years at the Braid. So she edits. I sometimes give her my material to look at. She gives me her material to look at. She was working on another project. I read the whole project, gave her notes. So there's 10, 12 years of respect and valuing each other's abilities, smartness, writing styles, writing abilities. I mean, what Lisa does so beautifully is she creates beauty out of words. They're like poetry. Her words are like poetic and beautiful. I think Lisa also, for all of her writing, gets to the emotion, gets to the heart. I mean, why go to see a play unless it moves you in some way, teaches you, moves you, makes you inspired? I mean, that her writing is that. And having said that, when she did the first version stories from the Violins of Hope, I did edit that. Every single word over and over. And when it went from, we were going to perform it in person for a live audience to having to do it recorded on Zoom, we altered that version, and I helped edit that version so that it would be successful in that format. So we have a long history of respect and working together. Now,
Rhonda is, I mean, she understands the structure of plays, and that we'd go back and forth about, I'd want to put something in. No, you can't do this. But she's absolutely right, you know. And so for me, it's been a big learning curve because I was used to writing prose, novel, and not a full play. So, I mean, the two of us, our skills just dovetail really well.
Well, I want to touch on something that Rhonda said in getting down to the emotion of it. How does one do that? What's the secret?
What's the secret? The secret is to find the authentic feeling behind anything that you're going to have a character do. They can't just do it. There has to be a dramatic reason that pulls the play forward and not go off on a tangent, and that there are little hooks along the way that need to tie this whole enterprise together, which is why it's so hard to write a play. Because it does, one thing has to connect to another and lead you. But throughout the whole thing, to tell a story, where's the heart of the story? Where does it touch people? And not in a corny way, but in a way that informs and is meaningful. That's what I'm always looking for.
And gives, even when you have a character that doesn't do the things you want them to do, right? What's the pathos? What's the reason? What's behind it? To just do a cliche character, I mean, really, at the Braid either, we're not interested in stereotypes. We're interested in understanding the driving factors underneath, the thing that moves people, the traumas that people have had, the pains, the woundings, the whatever. I mean, you're asking a really good question, which is, how do you infuse your writing with heart?
So are you doing this through behavior and dialogue, or is it more behavior than dialogue?
Both.
Okay. And also situation. You have a violin whose owner, you have a violin that was given to a next door neighbor and is told, when I come back, I'll get it. And they never come back. Mm-hmm. Inherently, that situation is moving. Yeah. And then you have that that character telling the story about how they were friends and how Emmy gave me her violin and told me to hold it, and then she never came back. So you have the situation, you have the beautiful language, and you have some of the plot.
And then the fact that the friend doesn't want to play this violin because it's so painful to her, because it reminds her of her friend. So what is she going to do with that violin?
Right.
She gives it to this man, to this luthier,
to restore
it. And so, because it's the last voice her friend will ever have, is that violin. Because violins, one of the things that Amnon was so good at saying was that violins are living things. They're made of wood. They breathe, they bend, they crack, and they have the closest thing to a human voice. So this organic quality about them makes them, every violin has been touched by a lot of musicians, and there's something, he really believed, something in each violin that tells its new player what its previous owners were, who they were, and what they felt. Which is kind of incredible. I'm not a violinist, but this seems to be something that a lot of violinists have said.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, now we can go back, now that I went on this tangent about how do we draw emotion or get down to the emotion. So now we're collaborating, and now what's this process?
We sit next to each other in front of Lisa's computer. We used to do it on Zoom when we were during COVID, when we were working on the script for Australia. It was all done on Zoom, and that is much more challenging for me.
Yeah, because she had to watch while I'm editing, and I edit differently than she does.
Right, sure, yeah.
That's actually the most difficult. It's like going, just move your cursor up there and put it up there. No, this is how Lisa edits. Both are correct. They're just different.
Sure, fair enough.
Different logics.
Yeah.
But when it comes to actual writing, that we start and finish each other. We get ideas. Sometimes I'll go, okay, well, this is good, but we didn't put this in the scene, and we need to go back and put this in. Or she'll say, this character wouldn't say this, or we need to change this. Again, because the relationship is built on respect and long time working together. If one person says it's not working, usually the other person will say, okay, well, let's see what we can do. Even if I think it's working, unless she's so sure and I'm on the fence, and then I'll go, okay, let's go with it. And the same for Lisa.
And so then what about certain things like stage directions or action or anything like that,
Minimal.
Yeah.
we for good or for bad, which we're seeing now as we're in the middle of a rehearsal for International City Theater, their version of it. We don't write a lot of stage directions because directors often have their own ideas.
Sure.
But what we also see is that sometimes it's a roadmap for them that they can use or not use.
Sure.
But we're sneaky. We put the action in the words. They have to do that action.
I learned that a long time ago. That if you want the play to have something in it that's really important in your stage directions, put it in the dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Don't walk away from me.
Exactly right.
That's right.
That's
Don't walk away
interesting.
from
That's clever.
Why are you getting so angry?
Right.
That tells you how to deliver the line.
Right.
We got a lot of that.
We have. I would say we have some of that.
Where it's appropriate.
Where it's appropriate. Yeah. So, and we've used, because it is a memory play, there is a lot of lighting cues to help cue the audience as to where we are, because we also toyed for a while, because some of the play takes place when Amnon is a child, of using a young Amnon actor, but that's so hard to produce when you start bringing in younger actors. Right. So basically we're asking our actor to not play an 8-year-old, but the feeling of an 8-year-old. And he's in the scene with his mother and his father in memory.
Yeah.
And so it's very dynamic in a certain way, because you're asking the audience to travel with you in time, in a moment. In a moment, he steps into the scene, and now we're seeing that when he's 8 or 10 or 15 or whatever. Yeah. And that's really interesting. It's really fun. It could have been done with a kid.
Sure, yeah.
And that would be equally valid, but...
Yeah, and the audience is also, expected to realize that we have one actor, I don't know if I said this, one actor playing Amnon, 6 actors playing multiple roles. So it's just a slight change of accent, or a way of standing, or maybe a scarf or a hat, or just some very small, prop that will indicate to the audience, and they have to figure it out who this person is.
Now, is that on the page as well, or is that something that you guys put in there, or for like a symbolic representation, or do you just kind of leave a hint and let whoever the costume designer is doing? But
we've left a hint. What's interesting now is that we really didn't come down definitively about accents. This is an Israeli man. Some of the people in the play are Eastern Europeans, or they're German, we knew only one person needed to have an accent in the whole play, and that was the German, because we needed to hear that accent. We have a character saying that accent.
Very clever.
There you go. And it was important, because German on a Jewish ear is different in Israel than it is anywhere else, and it was important.
Or it was. Not as much anymore.
Sure.
But it was that time.
For the purposes of our play, it was, for this particular character especially. But it's interesting that the actors have allowed themselves to color their speech with a bit of accent, sometimes a lot of it, but it's working.
Okay.
And that's their doing. So that's been interesting. That's where the collaborative effort with the actors is always like a great surprise.
So because the memory play, and you mentioned the light shifts, what's that look like on the page? Is it just a light shift?
Yeah,
okay.
we did do lights shift. We also wrote notes to the director about costumes, about the set, about the fact that this is a memory play. Again, it's, follow it or don't follow it. Right. This was our intent, and this is how we wrote the play. Generally, when a director realizes the vision of the playwrights, the play is going to be a better play.
Sure. Yeah.
Because we wrote it a certain way. The other thing that changed from Australia to this this version was we were very clear we wanted Amnon and his wife to be in their 40s, 50s. And Moishe and Golda, who are his parents, to be in their 30s. Mm-hmm. So when he steps into a scene with his mother and his father, he's older than them. So you know right away this is memory. We didn't want a father to be older because then you have an old guy doing these scenes. It just didn't work in Australia. So, we'll see. Obviously, it's complicated in that it's demanding a lot of your audience in a good way.
Right.
To not be lazy and to be an active collaborator in what they're seeing on the stage and what they're going to be experiencing, which is true in theater anyway, but we're asking a lot of them. I feel that theater today, people can do that. I mean, I think about the Lehman trilogies, the three actors doing all those parts and, what was it, like 100 years?
Yeah.
We followed that. So there's been a lot of plays where people are required to use their imagination.
Sure, yeah, 100%.
And so hopefully that will carry forward for this as well.
So we finish our first draft, then what happens once you know that you've gotten to the end of the first draft?
First draft.
So what do you sit and listen to it, or do you sit back, read it together, make some tweaks? At what point do you at least do a stage reading, or do you just do a table read at one of your houses, or what?
Right. That's not first draft.
That's not first draft.
Yeah.
We went through quite a few drafts, read, came back, said, that's not working. This, we could see problems, and then we worked on it again and again and again. I don't know how many drafts.
A lot
so
of drafts.
When you say we read
separately. We read it separately.
Got it.
We take it.
Got it.
We print them because we work off of a printed page.
Sure, 100%. Right there with you.
On the computer, but we work off of, and then we bring our notes to each other, and we basically go scene by scene by scene by scene,
word by word.
What's working? We look at the big picture. What's working? What's not working? What's missing? Where do we need to move things? And then we start rearranging. We start crafting. We start eliminating. I mean, it's easy to start a play. It's really hard when you get to that point where it's, you know what I'm talking about, where you go, okay, it's all working. Yeah, this is good. Oh my God, we're stopped.
Yep.
It's wrong. And we can't go further because we didn't set it up. We didn't, I think also what happened from Australia to this version is, what was what I call the covert, which was what was the secret, if you will, of the play from Australia to this version has changed. I don't want to give it away, but there's a moment where he has to confront his mother. Amnon confronts his mother, Golda. They're older. And he's not able to work on these Holocaust violins that have come in after having gone to Germany. And all of his work has stopped. And
he's stopped.
It's like when we go through a trauma, that trauma can either stop us every single time, or we deal with the trauma and we work through it. And even then you can regress, right?
Sure, yeah.
So in a way, we're seeing in a kind of an elegant way him working through this family trauma to be able to work on these violins and bring them out to the world.
So when
Holocaust violins.
Yeah. So when you realize that you didn't set it up, how do you fix it? And does that change something else?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so
Totally.
This is the difficulty of writing a play.
Sure, yeah.
That's why it takes a while.
Right.
And we didn't actually have a table read until December. So that was really
this past December.
Yeah.
past December. and we brought in our actors, brought in some Braid
actors.
And really did the whole thing, and then had them and some other. We had some friends and family come, and we wanted feedback. And Karen Desai, who was the artistic director of ICT, came also, which was lovely of her. And everybody gave us feedback, which was incredibly helpful. So so from there we made some change, not as many, but because I think by then we were kind of there.
Was this already accepted to ICT when you did the table read? Okay, okay.
Yeah, and it was more for us. Like Karen has her own personal issue that I think why she wanted to do this play. She has her own family secrets that have been secrets. And so I think that this play spoke to her on a variety of levels. And I think that's why she chose to do it and wanted to do it. And I think she was being extremely patient with Lisa and I as we struggled to continue to hone the play and get it to be as good as we felt we could get it before we turned it over to her. I think she had a vision for it. She saw how lighting could play out. She had a very beautiful sketch of a set on the first day of the table read, like just this week, that we got to look at. She solved some real challenging problems that we were not able to solve as playwrights.
Because it's not our job as playwrights to do the set.
To do the set. We said what some of the
How are they
elements
going to
were.
do this?
Yeah.
So what were some of those problems that you guys ran into?
That we aren't into? Well,
That you ran into?
Yeah.
Well, one of them was that this is a man who, like his father, puts things away. He doesn't want to deal with them. He puts them away. They're hidden. So we literally have violins up in the rafters that have been there for 50 years. Literally, Amnon told me an inch of dust on them that his father had collected.
For real.
In all kinds of ways, either from refugees or from the musicians in the what became the Israel Philharmonic, but was then the Palestine Orchestra, who had German instruments that they couldn't bring themselves to play anymore.
After the war.
And they just came to him and said, if you don't take these, we're going to burn them. So he took them, but he never touched them. He put them away. So everything's being hidden. And the mother also, hidden. Nobody wants to talk about anything. And the violins are almost a metaphor for everything that's hidden. Right. So how do you do that? Where are you going to put those violins on a stage in a way so that when the German comes and discovers them, I'm not really giving anything away,
sure.
that it can be a moment. You know, his discovery, what would that set look like where things are hidden up there without people climbing all over the place?
Sure, right.
That's not our problem, but it is definitely a set designer's problem to do that in a way that's imaginative and that makes it easy for the actors to do their job and not be climbing all over the place. So, yeah.
There's also a beautiful, this has nothing to do with the set, other than I know she solved another problem. We needed a bookshelf because there's a book that becomes, that comes out on the set in the beginning and then plays out during the climactic moment. And that book is an important talisman of the family in a way, and has information that gets revealed. And so where's that book going to live, and how is that going to live, and how are the musicians going to live? Where are they going to be on the set?
Right.
And how do you do that? And she's got a beautiful theater. It's like, I guess the person who designed
the taper
designed the taper at the Music Center. It's a gorgeous theater, very expansive. So, you know, how are you going to do this set and be able to control some of the costs? Now, again, that's not my problem. I have those problems at the Braid. But, you know, there are things that you need to have there. So, but she did a beautiful job. The set designer did a beautiful job. and I'm excited to see how, we're seeing the beginnings of the actors moving
they're
around
really beginning
the stage.
to inhabit their roles,
it's
and
really
it's something to watch them do that. That's always an interesting process of where they find the beats, where they find the emphasis of a line may not be the same as the way you heard it,
right.
but they give something else to it. They find humor where you may not even have intended it, but that's fine. We need all the humor we can get in this play. So, that's just the process of a play being put up on its feet.
She's cast some excellent actors. They're called on really to play many different parts, and so far we're seeing that being done beautifully. And what I really admire is that there's a real sense of commitment to the material. Again, there's a lot of language, and that's an important piece for people to hear, and so they feel that, and we see that what
the
they
actors
bring.
seem to really like it.
So are you both at rehearsals every day, or?
We went. Rehearsals just started this week, so we went this week. I think we'll go some next week. The thing that I think is marvelous and maybe a little unusual is that Karen is incredibly welcoming of the writers during this whole. She wants us there, which a lot of directors do not.
You should be, or you're allowed to be. You guys are Dramatists Guild members. You know the Bill of Rights.
Yeah, that's all on paper. But the reality is,
I know.
Be there, or you can be welcomed.
Yeah,
fair enough. Yeah,
very welcoming, and she's even encouraged her actors to approach us and ask whatever they want to ask. Factual. There are factual things. There are things with accents. That.
Sure.
But there are also emotional things, and usually, a lot of directors don't want to let go of that. They want their interpretation. But she's been really very solicitous of us, and that's beautiful.
So,
she's
how
a dream for a playwright.
Yes, she is.
You started this interview by saying that they're tackling new plays, which we admire as well. She gets it. She's smart, and she is open.
What? No, so because I'm doing the math here real quick, and how I'm assuming rehearsals are Monday through Friday.
Saturday too.
Saturday too.
Yeah, we're missing a rehearsal.
Well, God bless you guys. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. And then how many hours a day?
It's 2 to 7. Yeah, from 2 o'clock to 7. That's fine.
So they're doing 6 days of rehearsals, so 30 hours of rehearsals for 3 weeks before opening.
Yes, insane, huh?
And
they don't play around.
She's not even in the space next week because of the Long Beach Grand Prix. So we're in a church.
And then there's tech.
And then there's tech.
So I want to go.
But I have to tell you, every single day, those actors, it's a blooming process that's going. They are totally getting it, and every day it's like from here to here.
That's great.
Because they're good actors.
Sure. I want to go to the music aspect of this, as far as how this look not just on the page, but where it comes into play. I mean, are you choosing the pieces and this is the not orchestration. That's not the right word for it, but
No, actually that is.
Okay.
In a way. We met because Noreen Green, who's the artistic director of the LA Jewish Symphony, is the person who worked with us from day one. She was the one who was conducting the Violins of Hope concert, and was the one who was having that conversation with our board member that started this whole thing. She worked with us. The three of us sat down and listened to music. We would say, we need music here. And she would suggest something. And, what we have in here she's an expert in Jewish music of all sorts, but also classical music. And so that's what it is. It's Jewish folk music, it's liturgical music, it's classical music of all sorts. And that's what's mixed into all of this and, interwoven. So this is her baby too.
Sure.
And, she came to Australia. She's going to be performing in this one too. And actually, the violin that is going to be played for this production is not one of the Violins of Hope, but it is the violin that was owned by a man who was a Holocaust survivor whose story is in the play.
Oh, wow.
So it's kind of moving that they were able to get that violin.
Okay, so and then...
And I just want to add
sure.
that and Dr. Green brings also an intimate knowledge of the play, right? She's been there since Stories and Violins of Hope. She conducted the quartet and she played piano for that version. She was in Australia and now for this. So she knows the script really, really well. And she's there to support the actors. So the music is under some of the passages. So as if the words themselves aren't emotional enough,
Yeah.
you then have music that supports the emotion of what's being said. And like what Lisa said, because Noreen has such an understanding of Jewish music, we're in Israel, and then we're playing something that was, being played and sung during a time of Israel's independence, and that comes in at that point. Or Eastern Europe klezmer music, and that comes in when we're back in Warsaw, for example. So it's really an interesting journey with the music. There's a couple scenes in a movie theater where Amnon and his dad are watching American Westerns. That was something they did that we took from the interviews. And so she's playing William Tell Overture as the posse, and that kind of thing. So you have, without it being in your face, so to speak, you have this incredibly rich backdrop of music.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What are your plans with it after the run? Do you have...
We don't know yet.
Come and see it and make a suggestion.
Okay.
Look, isn't every playwright's dream is to bring a play and have it seen by the multitudes? So because this play, it looks at survivors differently. It looks at what music gave to people in the Holocaust. So it's a very different take on a Holocaust story, if you will. It would be amazing to be able to share this play in schools and colleges and community theaters, because I think that not only is it moving, it's moving and informative, I guess. And it tells you something different than what you've heard or seen before. So that adds to the narrative. It adds to the conversation about what happened during that time period.
Sure.
And how people survived and how music provided some comfort to them, reminded them of, good times at home, whether they were in concentration camps or in the forests or in the ghettos. People don't know or aren't aware that music was a part of people's lives. And actually violins, stringed instruments, saved lives. Like if you had your violin in a camp, you were often tapped to be part of an orchestra for the Nazis. And the fact that you could play gave you more food and hope that may have increased your likelihood of surviving.
Wow.
So it's not the main story, but in telling the larger story, you hear some of this.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then what are you guys working on right now? Or after, what's coming after?
We're talking about a new play, but we can't talk about
that. All right, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
We did a series of interviews from many different, kind of like Anna Devere Smith from Twilight, where she interviewed a lot of different people from this one incident, and we did that. Right. And so we're thinking about that as a possibility.
Right, and where can people find your work?
Well, at the Braid.
Yeah, at the Braid. At www.the, and then like a hyphen, Braid, BRAID.org. In fact, in our last show, which was it was called Traveler's Prayer, Lisa had a beautiful story, 7-minute story about a trip she took to Europe during your sophomore year of college.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then in this show on kindness, which there's just 2 more performances, and people probably won't get a chance to see it. She has a little piece in it, and I actually wrote a piece for this show too about I'm evacuated from my house. Actually, both of us are. We're both evacuated. Both have our houses, but in different places. And so it was my story of a kindness that these 2 young guys who were on motorcycles and tatted up offered to me on the second day of the fires. They brought me to my house. And so it's, how do we trust people, and do they come through for you?
Sure.
You know, there's a lot of cynicism today, and there's also a lot of like, you trusted that person, you're an idiot. But people do come through.
Yeah.
So Lisa's going to have a story in our next show, which is called For the Love of Animals.
Oh.
I can't tell you the title because there's a bad word in it.
I don't know. Do you allow bad words?
Oh, well, we've cussed so many times on this show.
So the title of the thing is Blue Fucker.
Nice. Nice.
And it's the name of our bird.
Oh, nice.
Survived the fires
God
somehow.
bless him.
And it's just a crazy story.
That's funny. And then finally, are you on the socials?
Oh. Well, the Braid
Well, the Braid is. So
Okay.
the Braid Stories, I think, is our YouTube channel. And I think that's also, I should know this. My people are going to really get mad at me. They can find us, Braid.
It'll be in the show notes as well.
Thank you.
So, my pleasure.
But yeah, that's it.
Well, Lisa and Rhonda, thank you for coming on this episode of Playwright Spotlight.
Thank you,
it was
Steve.
an honor. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Playwright Spotlight. Again, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and share the show with a friend. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the channel. And in the meantime, until we see each other again, keep writing.